Fueled by Deathcast.
You do have a theater background? You went to school for it, right?
Yes, I went to school for theater.
What drew you to that? Where was that in your childhood? Was that something that you kind of gravitated towards later in school? What drew you to the theater world?
Honestly, it's all to do with Henry from last podcast. It really was the kind of thing where I was a really not a good person when I was younger. I was a really bad bully. I was very morbidly obese, and I was a mean person. I went through anger management and did the whole thing. And Henry, essentially, when I went into high school, he was popular. He always did theater. And I had no desire to do any of it. And he's like, listen, we're going to be fat forever, but we're also funny. And there are things that you can do to get to use what we have and to make your life better. So he's like, what is a way, how do we be fat forever and make people like us? This is at the age of I'm 14 and he's 16, 17 years old. And I was like, you're right. And he's like, why not, instead of putting all of our self-hatred towards ourselves, why don't we use it and make things with it?
You and Henry started doing sketch comedy pretty much at that time, and then in college as well. I mean, that must have been pretty easy as well, too, because, you guys have been so close your entire life, brother and sister. Was it just natural, the writing process kind of doing that?
Yeah, it was crazy. We had a big group. So they started before I went to college, and then I went to Florida State because they had started it. And so then I just immediately joined it. And I love it because Holden even says back then, he's like, yeah, Henry kept saying oh, my sister's coming and just assumed you were going to be a part of our sketch comedy group. He's like, but then you're actually fucking funny. So it kind of worked out. I'm like, thank you. I think that's a compliment.
That's great. Well, and that all coalesces into a couple different forms, and then eventually what would become Murderfist. And full disclosure, I had known who Henry was tangentially, and then through that, had heard your name. But the first thing I think I ever saw you in was Sads. Was that skit? I remember laughing until crying seeing that because it's such a great premise.
Eat two, nub, and then I ate it. Why did I do it?
I don't know.
It was so stressful.
You don't eat the nub.
You don't eat the nub.
You don't
eat the nub.
You moved to New York City to basically pursue that, right? To pursue sketch comedy.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like? It's notoriously one of the hardest industries ever, and it breaks people down. Was that, I guess to use the lack of a better word again, was that terrifying?
Guys. Stop screaming.
I'm trying to
Yes, definitely. It was definitely terrifying. And going up to New York and essentially being at the bottom of the barrel, because when they left college and they started, so essentially I've just been following this horde of men my entire life. It's well, all right, well, yeah, I may as well go. Let's go fucking figure it out, because in the back of my mind, I always thought you could choose again and do something else. Yeah. And it was very scary, but what we loved and how we met Kissel and how we met, Michael Che and how we met all these people back in the day was that we were a sketch comedy group, because in the world of comedy, everyone hates each other. In the sketch world, you hate the stand-up world. The stand-up world, you hate the improv world. It is very divided. And we were the only sketch comedy group that worked in the stand-up world. So we would do stand-up shows. So we hung out with only stand-ups and never identified as a sketch comedy group, which I think that is a weird identity crisis thing that we all had, because it was viewed as lame in the comedy world to do sketch comedy. I don't think that is true, but that is how it was viewed. So we did a lot. We essentially would just party all the time, do many shows every week, for nothing. Wow. For ourselves, to not make any money and to be so broke for such a long time. And that's why I had a full-time job, because you couldn't, comedy wasn't paying the bills.